All right, let's get right into this. So I just finished working at the law firm for the day, and basically I'm getting ready to go into this incredibly important video. And what it is the Social Security Administration published what's called EM 25040. Again, EM 25040. Specifically, this was released by OMS OFPPI DFPC, which, to put it in another way, is an operations center that basically releases information about changes that are upcoming to the Social Security Administration. Now, if you receive Social Security benefits, this may affect some of you. If you are seeking Social Security benefits, this may affect some of you. Bottom line is this: there was a Trump change in how the government was going to be acting or doing things in the future. And the whole Trump change, the whole thing is basically based off of trying to slow down or stop fraud from occurring. Let's get into it. This is the retention date of February 15th, 2026. So basically, it's supposed to last for a little bit, around a year or a little bit shorter than a year in this case. It is emergency message from the Social Security Administration 25040 if you want to look it up. This message provides instruction. And remember, this is an internal back office release. This is not something that gets released to the public. So if there's acronyms that you don't understand, or it seems like it's very formal and doesn't have cutesy wording, that's why. This is an internal work document from the Social Security Administration that was released recently to update essentially what happens with your benefits. And they're removing an option you had when it comes to your benefits. And now you don't have that option anymore. This message provides instructions to Social Security Administration employees who process initial benefit applications to inform technicians of the immediate policy changes to initial claims processed in GN 0240, 402.001 and GN 02402.005. Again, this is an internal document. It's not meant to be cutesy, and I'll explain what this stuff means in civil language after I get through reading it. These updates are based on the existing federal law and reinforced by the recently issued executive order. This is Trump's executive order 14247, which was the modernizing payments to and from America's bank account. And, the big point of this was basically trying to slow down or stop fraud, requiring electronic payments. Due to changes in the Department of the Treasury's payment processes, individuals receiving paper checks after September 30th, 2025 may experience a disruption in timely payment delivery. So in other words, if you're receiving a payment in the form of a check, September 30th, 2025, that's kind of your cutoff date. That's when you're going to not be able to receive checks in that fashion or form in the future, because paper checks are the most, basically frauded form of Social Security, payment system that we tend to have. There's just a lot of a fraud and abuse that occurs when they mail you a check. Background: GN 02402.001 outlines the agency's process with regard to federal law requiring that all federal payments be made electronically. Previously, Title II beneficiaries and Title 16 recipients were able to temporarily receive paper benefit checks if they did not have a direct deposit account and chose not to enroll in Direct Express. So in other words, if you wanted to get a paper check, you could basically request it by saying, I can't do these other things. You got to mail me a check. Now, you may have noticed some of the wording there. If we put our lawyer hats on, they said previously Title II beneficiaries. So that's your retirement, spousal benefits, ex-spousal benefits, your SSDI benefits. So, you worked and paid in the program. You're a beneficiary. That's Title II. Title 16 are the SSI people, the supplemental security recipients, the supplemental security income recipients. So they call Title II people the beneficiaries. They call Title 16 people the recipients, because technically you are not under their definition of a traditional beneficiary, because you didn't pay for it. You didn't pay in, you didn't do whatever, yada, yada. So I've noticed that they're starting to use that distinction more and more. Anyways, bottom line is this. They're saying you used to be able to go ahead and get a paper check. That is now changing. On March 25th, 2025, the president signed Executive Order 14247, requiring the Department of Treasury to phase out issuing paper checks for all federal disbursements no later than September 30th, 2025. Now, remember, this video is July 8th. So you got July, August, most of September, and then you're cut off. That's it. No more futzing around, no more this, no more that. You have to have basically a direct express card, or you're going to have a bank account where they can direct deposit it, stuff like that. Okay. All right. Next. So, in order to promote the financial integrity, security, and operational efficiency of the federal government, they don't want to have to mail checks anymore. They don't want to have to use the USPS because it's becoming too costly to mail checks. Even though it's a government program to another government program, it's just too expensive. That's their whole government, operational efficiency. And also, like I said before, when it comes to fraud, paper checks are easily frauded compared to a lot of the digital stuff that's out there. This executive order reinforces the existing law 31 USC 3332, which currently mandates electronic payments under GN 02402.001. All right. So just to summarize, you have lost the option, or you're about to lose the option, to receive checks going forward. That's the bottom line. You're going to have to receive it in some digital way. It'll come on a card, like a direct express debit card. It'll come and be deposited directly into your bank account, but you're not going to be able to get a check in the future after September 25th. It's September 30th, 2025. That's the cutoff. So, make your changes. If you're watching this video and you're like, I always get my check, it's going to suck for you. So just be aware of it. All right. Policy change. Effective immediately, the agency will comply with the relevant legal authorities and initial claims by removing references to an option to receive a paper check and directing people who insist on paper check to apply to Treasury for a waiver. I don't know who's going to basically be able to get a waiver. I'm not really sure. I would assume they're going to expect certain things, like, for example, certain disabling conditions that require a paper check, stuff like that. But, keep in mind, they are phasing out paper checks. They don't want to have to use USPS for it. They don't want to have to go ahead and issue them. They want you to just digitally receive it. In compliance with the law and enforced by the recently released executive order, the following changes supersede current instructions in GN 02402.001 and GN 02402.005 and are effective as of the date of this publication, which it was just published, right? Updates to GN 02402.001. So here's the actual rule change that they're putting in place. Section C, Bullet 4, is no longer applicable and has been removed. That's to give you the right of a paper check. Effective immediately, technicians should no longer offer a temporary paper check option while waiting for Treasury contact regarding enrollment in electronic funds transfer, known as EFTs. So, when you're sitting there thinking like, oh, I'll still have the option, not really. Like, they're full on pulling that option out of their system. So if you want to get a paper check, it ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen. You're going to have to apply to the Treasury for a waiver, and a lot of people are just going to get a bank account and have it be direct deposited. Section C, Bullet 5 should read, as of March 1st, 2013, Title II beneficiaries and Title 16 recipients must select a form of electronic payment, or if they allege a qualifying exemption, then apply for a waiver. Treasury is responsible for reviewing the request and making a determination. Instruct the individual to contact the U.S. Treasury Electronic Payment Solutions Center at 1-800-967-5042. Currently, SSA cannot accept a waiver application or approve a waiver request. Treasury will contact the individuals directly once they make a determination. C. Additionally, field offices are no longer required to maintain a list of financial institutions in their servicing area. Okay, so put another way is basically they're giving up on this whole paper check thing. They're giving up on, basically banks and their local service. They're just going to tell you, go find a bank, go set up an account, or get a direct express card. And I'll read it to you. They actually give an if this, then do this. They actually give a walkthrough as to what you have to do with this, and the law isn't new. It's just they're finally enforcing it. That's what's going on. Updates to GN 02402.005 Section E are effective as of the date of this publication, so effective immediately. If the applicant does not have an account or refuses a form of electronic payment and does not allege one of the exemptions to the electronic payment requirement listed in GN 02402.001B, then advise the individual of Treasury's electronic payment requirement, discuss direct deposit and its advantages. If direct deposit is not a viable option, discuss direct express and its advantages. So in other words, they're going to do whatever they can to sell you on the idea that you should not receive a paper check going forward. They don't want to pay for USPS to mail it to you. They don't want to pay for the fraud when it happens. Because a lot of people, they get frauded out of their check and they're like, well, where's my money? Well, your money's gone. And then they have to like, oh, we got to give you another check. And now, you know what I mean? And now we're just stealing from the treasury, from the trust funds at some point, and the future extension of whatever, because somebody got frauded because they had to have a paper check. On the other side, there's individuals who might need a paper check. I'm sure there'll be somebody in the comments saying like, I have to have a paper check because of my impairment, yada, yada. I get it. There's two sides to it. I don't know how responsive that U.S. Treasury electronic payment waiver system is going to be, but I mean, it is what it is. It just, they're finally enforcing this situation. All right. Now, if the applicant does not appear to meet the exemption requirements and still does not agree with the electronic payment requirement, then this is where they're going to basically like just force you to do it. Explain the electronic payment requirement again and state the following. So this is the exact terminology that they will dictate to you from the Social Security Administration, in this situation where you're like, I'm on the fence, I still want to use it. This is the exact terminology that they're going to use with you. We will process their application with the paper check payment method and explain that in order to continue receiving paper checks, they must file for a waiver with Treasury by calling 1-800-967-5042, and Treasury will make a determination and inform them of the decision. And Treasury has advised that if individuals remain on paper checks after September 30th, 2025, while the waiver request is pending, or if it is not approved, they may experience a disruption in timely payment delivery. In other words, you ain't going to get your check. That's the reality of it. Like if you think you can push the government around and make them give you a check, even though you're not going to get a paper check or, a check in this situation if you push it past September 30th, 2025. It's just not going to happen. Okay. You will, I'll quote again, experience a disruption in timely payment delivery, which is their polite way of saying you ain't going to get a check. Okay. Note, if an individual inquires about the status of waiver request, refer them to Treasury's waiver helpline, 1-800-967-5042. Okay. Now, if the claimant indicates that they meet one of the exemption reasons listed in GN 0240 2.001B, I'll have to pull that up and I'll let you know what they are by the end of the video. Explain to the applicant the following. We will process their application with the paper check payment method and explain that in order to continue receiving paper checks, they must file for a waiver with the Treasury. Treasury will make a determination and inform them of the decision. Treasury has advised that if individuals remain on paper checks after September 30th, 2025, while the waiver request is pending, or if it is not approved, they may experience a disruption in timely payment delivery. In other words, once again, unless you are approved for this and you're running out of time, to have it be flawless or the payment continues without issue, you're running out of time to file one of these requests for a waiver. So just the bottom line. Note, in representative payee cases, the representative payee must also file for a waiver with the Treasury. Additionally, SSA does not make a paper check a waiver determination. Now, if the claimant asks of consequences for failing to select an electronic payment, because they're advising the SSA employees about how to deal with you. Like if you're like, I have to have this payment this way, here's what they say. Explain the following to the applicant. Treasury has advised that if individuals remain on paper checks after September 30th, 2025, while the waiver request is pending, or if it is not approved, they may experience a disruption in timely payment delivery. So they're doing everything they can to say to you as politely as they can, that you are not going to get your check. They're calling it essentially a disruption in timely payment delivery, but what it comes down to is you're not going to get your Social Security check because you requested it in a form that they're no longer willing to honor if you don't meet one of the exceptions. All right. Process for initial applications. It goes through scheduling appointments, phone in-person claim interviews, yada, yada, yada. Let me look up real quick while we're rocking through this thing. Hold on. Let me look up real quick essentially what the exceptions are. Let me just see where they are in here. Okay, here we go. Let me just look up the rule real quick so that I can give you exactly what's in it. That way you're good to go. Hold on one sec. Sorry, I have to lean over the microphone a little bit to get to it. All right, let's see what we got here. Hold on. Yep, direct deposit form, notification, subsection B. All right, I've got it here. It's GN 02402.001. Here we go. Exemptions. Treasury may grant one of the following exemptions so that you get to keep your check. for the paper submission or the paper payment. Treasury automatically grants an exemption in instances where the beneficiary or recipient was born prior to May 1st, 1921. Was anybody in here born before May 1st, 1921 and continues to receive payment by check? So basically, I don't even know how old that person would be. Hold on, let me look. Let me get how old is someone born? So May 1st, let's say April 30th, I think it was 1921. Hold on, let me check and make sure I was right. 1921. Hold on, let me look that up again. I gotta find the Google page I just used. Did I lose my Google page? I think I just lost my Google page. Hold on. I think I just lost it. Hold on, let me get rid of some of these other ones real quick. Get rid of this one. Get rid of this one. Get rid of this one. This is kind of weird. Oh, no. Here it is. Here it is. Okay, perfect. So yeah, 1921. So let's take a look real quick. Someone born on April 30th, 1921 would be 104 years old as of July 8th, 2025. Okay, so I mean, geez, that's cray right there. That's so somewhere around 104 years old, because that statement they gave me through AI is a little weird. But so yeah, so basically that's not applying here. That's not applicable. Okay. The next option is the payment is not eligible for direct deposit to a Direct Express prepaid debit card account. So, there are certain instances where you're not allowed to get one of those cards because you did something, or, something occurs, or something's unique to your system, your file, your whatever. The next one is the beneficiary or recipient's Direct Express debit card has been suspended or canceled. And this happens when there's fraud to it, abuse of it, stuff like that, where they have to go ahead and, get you on another option. But they usually push you to just open up a bank account where essentially, they can deposit the funds thereafter. Subsection 2, Treasury may grant an exemption in instances when a beneficiary or recipient requests an exemption from the electronic funds transfer requirement, and the beneficiary or recipient, 1, has a mental impairment that prevents him or her from handling their payments electronically, and he or she is not assisted by representative payee. But see, I don't see that really even being an option, because they're going to force you at that point to have a payee. There are some instances where people can't find them, but then they just push them onto essentially, some company that acts as a payee. So I don't know. I don't see that one as really even being an option. Let's look at option 2 here. Lives in a remote geographic location that does not have the infrastructure necessary to receive payments electronically. That I could see. There are some parts of Texas, Alaska, stuff like that, where it's just like the sticks, the boonies. So bottom line is this, I could see that one. Note, foreign beneficiaries who receive electronic payment are not required to apply for an exemption. So if you're a foreign beneficiary living outside of the country, you don't have to use an exemption, which is ironic because that's where a lot of fraud still occurs. Individuals who indicate that an EFT payment would impose a hardship because of a mental impairment that prevents them from handling electronic payments, or reside in a remote geographic location within the U.S. which lacks infrastructure to provide electronic payments must apply with Treasury for an exemption. Treasury will require the individual to sign a certification before a notary public and under the penalty of perjury. So like you gotta make your point that you live in the middle of nowhere, or that you mentally cannot handle anything other than a check. No, Treasury is responsible for determining if an individual is eligible for an exemption. SSA is not responsible for the exemption determination or its development. So put another way, just to make it very simple, the SSA is putting that on the the Treasury. And basically, the Treasury will decide whether or not you get to receive your benefits after September 30th of 2025, if you are requesting them in the form of an actual paper check, where you have to request a waiver to continue to receive it. Otherwise, it's Direct Express card, or it has to be deposited. Okay, excellent. I'm now going to get us set for the next video. Please remember to like, and please remember to subscribe. We get a lot of people who don't hit that like button, and that's really sad, because these videos take a lot of time to do. Not so much time to prep, because I live in this law. You know what I mean? Like I have an unhealthy relationship with Social Security. I work at it all day, then I work a little bit outside, and then I literally do these videos. So like, if you're ever wondering, like, why does he seem to know so much? It's because of these YouTube videos and the varied clientele I get related to this entire subject base. So anyways, my nose is a little itchy, but bottom line is this, I would say, Please remember to like and subscribe. Also, head over to Google if you get a chance and type in Disability Resolution Law Firm. Again, Disability Resolution Florida. It's the company that I work for. It's the law firm. We obviously work to obtain disability benefits for people. Also, with that said, I don't do Medicare. Medicare is not my thing. It's not something I spend time on. I don't do a lot with it on the channel. I'm trying to do more with it on the channel. I partnered with Chapter. Go ahead and give them a call if you want to go ahead and get a checkup on your Medicare. So basically, the main thing is I would do it for two reasons. Number one, if you haven't checked on whether or not you have a really good Medicare, program for your particular impairments, medication needs, surgeries, whatever, give them a call. You know what I mean? Most people, you're supposed to do it at least, every 12 months. You could do it every 6 months, but the bottom line is give them a call. They might be able to get you on a better program. With that said, also, these guys are watching what's going on with the massive $14.6 billion fraud in the Medicare health insurance industry. So as a result, if you're wondering if your doctor has an issue or if the plan you're on is going to have an issue because of this massive fraud capturing that the Trump administration was able to find. I mean, it's just, I didn't think he was going to get his big fish, his big catch. He did. These guys are watching that. So you can always call them and ask them, is your program, are your doctors facing any issues related to that massive $14.5 billion fraud situation? So anyways, I will catch you a little bit later at the next video. Keep in mind, Mondays and Thursdays, I go live. So basically 2 days I'll go live and answer questions for free. And then if you want to hire me for a 1 hour private consultation where you feed me a fact pattern of what happens and how do I fix this? There's a mini contract below. I will catch you at the next video shortly. Let's rock and roll. And we will go from there. Attorney Walter Hnot, have a wonderful night and see you in about 15 minutes at the next video. And I'll put in the chat link for the actual URL. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.